You're listening to the Bigcast, your source for the latest in financial technology. Brought to you weekly by the Best Innovation Group, with your hosts, John Best and Glenn Sarvati.
Welcome to another edition of the Bigcast. My name is Glenn Sarvati on behalf of the Best Innovation Group, where we like to do cool things with financial technology. And speaking of cool things in financial technology, we've got an interview today with John Ainsworth, the CEO of Bonify, who's been doing a lot of that cool stuff for several years now. You may remember them also under the name of CU Ledger, which is still part of the operation. We'll explain that a little bit more. He's got some new stuff that kind of caught my attention, and I thought it was a great chance for us to catch up again. So we'll be talking to John in just a couple of minutes. I want to remind you, you can always find out more about the Best Innovation Group by checking out our website, big-fintech.com. Also want to remind you that coming up in, depending on when you're listening to it, I won't try to time it out, but Wednesday, July 10th, the next edition of our regular CU Town Hall, that will be taking place at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. Always free to join, but you do need to register in advance. Go out to cutownhall.com to do that. You'll also find some recordings of past episodes there. It's always lively, live, and interactive. A nice crowd that gets together and talks about the latest issues that are really facing the credit union industry these days. And our Grand Poobah, John Best, kind of leads and facilitates that open-ended conversation. So we hope you will join us for that one. And you can always, as I've said before, check out the rest of what the Best Innovation Group has to offer at the website, big-fintech.com. Things like the generative AI services, voice response units, etc., etc. I was recently in Washington, D.C. on a combination of a business and pleasure trip. I should probably reverse that. Pleasure combined with a little bit of business. But I can never avoid thinking about payments when I'm at these types of things. And it's just such a different world out there. Talk about micro-targeting. It's clear just based on the advertisements that you see in DC that you don't see elsewhere, that they are clearly honing in on a very, very select group they're trying to influence, whether it's the elected officials or their staff members. The couple of things that really caught my eye was walking through the airport. The Points guy had a pretty prominent signage on one of the advertising placards that said, "Your vacation is at risk." We had talked about this last fall. The Points guy has come out quite strongly. And I know it's not a guy anymore. It's actually a whole company and all that kind of things. But that's the way they actually portray themselves. It's still the brand name. They had cast their lot pretty clearly in opposition to the Credit Card Competition Act. In terms of what that may mean for rewards programs. And I speculated at the time that perhaps the Points guy sees that as something of an existential threat, given that his whole business is based around helping people sort through, navigate, and maximize their points usage. So the site that was up there, or the advertisement, is kind of focusing on that yet again. So again, it's interesting to me that the argument is on the side of the merchants and Senators Durbin and Marshall, who are pushing forward with the Credit Card Competition Act, that it would not impact rewards programs. Well, if somebody like the Points guy who's got a dog in the hunt is concerned about it, you got to wonder. Then I wondered, okay, well, what about merchants? I mean, are there any merchants that are coming along on the other side? I did not see this signage, but I talked to a friend of mine in D.C. who is following this type of thing as well. They pointed out that there's also a campaign, a concerted effort by the airline industry in opposition of the Credit Card Competition Act. We'll post, I've got a link to the Points guy and also to Airlines for America in our show notes. Airlines for America appears to be an influencing group representing across the board the U.S. airline industry. And again, they're coming at it with the Protect Our Points angle. Added some statistics that I was not aware of that are pretty compelling. According to this group, this is an airlines group, 63% of all frequent flyer points that were generated, this was as of 2022, I guess it's the most recent data they had, nearly two-thirds, 63% of those points that were earned were from credit cards. They were not from flying. They were from credit cards. So, I mean, we've actually kind of shifted the balance in an opposite direction in terms of currency. And according to this group as well, 1 in 4 U.S. households has an airline credit card. So that, this is very important to people. Again, airlines who, in many ways, I would think would be one of the places that would be benefiting from a reduction in interchange rates. High ticket items online tends to be a higher cost code. They are advocating against the Credit Card Competition Act pretty clearly on this one. And given that we just had the Visa MasterCard settlement rejected by a judge, the Credit Card Competition Act arguably could become a bigger deal once again. Back to that one in just one second. I also keep wondering, there's one merchant group that has actually come out. I would love to see a small business group. Well, I doubt an individual small business, which just doesn't have enough of a dog in the hunt, but maybe one of the small business organizations would stand up and say, leave us out of this. This is stupid. If you really take a look, so much of the talking points around the Credit Card Competition Act is a benefit to small businesses because they're a much more sympathetic group as opposed to big box retailers who stand to gain. I'd like to see and the problem is maybe that small businesses, it's just not worth the battle for them, but they're basically being co-opted for their, sympathy. At the end of the day, someone ought to just stand up and say, we're not getting anything out of this. Stop dropping our name, because I think we all know that, I shouldn't say that. We don't all know, but the folks who follow this closely, small businesses have virtually nothing to gain from the Credit Card Competition Act. Any supposed savings that would crop up would be eaten up by middlemen before it showed up in the small business pocket anyway. All you got to do is go back and look at the Richmond Fed study that took place after the initial implementation of the Durbin Act that said that there was virtually no benefit to consumers or small businesses. So take it as it is, but I find those two to be continually part of the conversation that we're going to be having for some time, and even longer now that we know that the Visa MasterCard settlement's been rejected. Our friends at FT Partners, you may not have seen this. You probably saw that it was rejected. That part is not exactly breaking news. However, our friends at FT Partners did a nice write-up. As of last Friday, the actual full report, 80-some pages, that the judge issued about the rationale for rejecting the claim was actually issued. They did a nice write-up. It's you have to subscribe to their services. It does not cost anything. I would highly recommend it because they put out some great stuff at FT Partners. But they pointed out that the judge actually did cite specific arguments that were made as kind of friend of the court briefs by both Target and 7-Eleven in making their decision to not go forward. And a couple of the things that kind of caught my eye, we had talked about this before. There was this very bizarre carve-out that said that the old rules about honor all cards would continue to apply to digital wallets. And that was one of the things that the judge pointed to. It was kind of a secondary reason. But still, I never understood why that was in there in the first place. And it looks like it might have come back to bite the card networks. This also points out that this really doesn't have much of an effect on the card networks itself, or the lawsuit defendants. It really has to do with the issuers. So it's kind of another one of those, very complicated things about who's fighting whose battles. The other one that Target brought up in a couple different places is what they really are concerned about is the honor all cards rule. And they pointed out that the settlement, quote unquote, allows defendants to enter into special deals with certain merchants. And they also allow defendants to prohibit surcharging at the issuer level, which I didn't necessarily understand. I didn't see that in there. If those were the objections, it would seem to have been relatively easy givebacks, but I don't know that that would have been enough to change the story. But it just kind of gives you kind of the lay of the land of what is probably going to be a long trail that we're still watching on the Visa MasterCard situation. So just for your information, and like I say, the FT Partner stuff is pretty good if you want to track it down. Another quasi-business stop I made along the way in Washington, D.C. was the Capital One Cafe. And I know that's not news to people, that they've been around for some time, but unless you're in their footprint, and I know there's one in Midtown Manhattan I've been to, there's one in Santa Monica, California I've been to, but the main headquarters kind of geography of Capital One is Richmond, Virginia, and fanning out into places like D.C. This was not a real centralized one and not in a major business district. It's actually in Chinatown. And the hotel that I was staying at, the person at the front desk actually recommended to me in the morning. He said, they got better coffee at the Capital One Cafe than we do at the stand here at the shop. So at the hotel. So at 7 a.m., I walked across the street over to there, and was kind of surprised that there were actually two people already on duty at the banking side of the cafe at like 7:05. At first, I thought they might just be security guards, but I just kind of engaged in a little bit of a conversation, kind of secret shopping stuff. Sure enough, they were bankers at 7 a.m. That is not banking as usual, which I thought was pretty darn interesting. Conversation I had with them, pointing out, again, very soft sell, not looking to to actually make a hard sell, trying to get me to open an account or anything like that. So I'm guessing that they're not paid on commission on those types of things. But they really positioned it as a co-working space that's available for people to sit, plug into Wi-Fi and work. There are community rooms available for booking in advance. Again, you don't have to be a Capital One customer to get it, to get access to those. So community center, I think, is a word that I would probably use to the way they're positioning this. And again, this is not 100% unique. Our friend Pete Nolte, from the Innovation Club here at Best Innovation Group, was talking about that at one of our recent events, how they've turned Vibrant Credit Union's branches in a few cases into, I'd put them well above coffee shops. They're actually sandwich and pastry shops. And, again, you can basically cover any of your needs through interactive teller machines, et cetera there. I know there's been progress along those lines at a couple of the credit unions in Vermont, even positioning it further as like makers locations and community centers. So it's not a new thing, but on the other hand, it is something that's getting a big push from a big marketer like Capital One. This person, again, I don't think they were speaking necessarily the official party line. They said, yeah, we're closing branches and opening more of these. And I'll come back to this, but I've been doing some research lately, and the resonance of having a branch in the vicinity continues, even with the younger population, to be more important than I think a lot of people give it credit for. It doesn't have to look like a traditional branch, but having some type of brick and mortar physical presence is still worthwhile. So just one more thing to kind of watch out for. That was my weekend in Washington, D.C. Take from that what you will. Another one, and this also came up out of the Innovation Club, another shameless plug. If you go out to big-fintech.com, there is a drop-down menu for the Innovation Club, and you can find out more about that. These are the types of things, it's usually more technology-oriented. Well, this is technology-oriented, but this is more one of those cautionary things. Another class action lawsuit popping up. And this one falls in the you've got to be effing kidding me kind of category. This one appears to still be at the proposed stage. I don't think it's actually been formally kind of started through the proceedings, but it's a lawsuit against Navy Federal Credit Union, seems to be kind of a poster child these days, and their vendor Verint, who provides some of their generative AI and chatbot voice recognition type services. Specifically the real-time agent assist product of Verint that Navy Federal uses, and another one called Speech Analytics. The argument that's being made in this case is that Verint's software is quote-unquote eavesdropping on calls. They also use the phrase wiretapping, which I haven't heard in a while, at one point during the complaint, and that therefore the unauthorized, listening in on consumer calls is in violation specifically of the California Privacy Act. So right now the class is only in the state of California. Here's the part that really kind of puts it over the edge to me, like, come on, guys, are you serious? People at the beginning of the call are told that Navy Federal can record and use these calls, for their various purposes in terms of, customer support, quality assurance, et cetera, kind of the standard language. The complaint says, yes, but it doesn't say that Verint is using this information. They claim that Verint is using it for, quote unquote, their own purposes. Maybe that purpose might be because Navy Federal, their client, asked them to do it. As an agent, and it's actually sitting there. It doesn't meet the smell test to me, but stranger things have happened. I'm thinking about the Americans with Disabilities Act and a lot of the patent trolling or, lack of compliance trolling that took place with class action a few years back on that. This is just one that bears watching. Again, I've posted the link to classaction.org, which has the information on this one if anybody is interested. And if you know anything more about it, I think we'd love to find out more about anything going on that front. Vaguely related on the AI side, I guess you could argue that this isn't as voice oriented, but the whole notion of screen scraping, which looked like we were finally potentially getting past with APIs and open banking and different ways of transferring information. I get the impression it's making a bit of a comeback under the name web scraping. And now that you've got, even smarter bots out there through generative AI that are going out crawling the web looking for content to actually train their large language models. So to me, it's not behind a paywall. People aren't giving out their credentials or anything like that, but anything that's out there is being used. The question again comes up: is that legal, and exactly how does that play out? Interesting article from CPO Magazine, which is a chief privacy officer, and I'll post a link to that one as well, saying yes, that is legal right now, but is it also affecting damaging anybody's own brand? Whoever the chief privacy officer may work for. We know there's intellectual property cases that are coming around at this point that say, okay, well, you can't just take our information and use it for your benefit. More to come on that one too, but the whole notion of screen scraping, much like Visa and MasterCard, may not go away, even though we seem to be kind of coming down to the end of the path on one side, a new little side road kind of pops up. Anyway, with all of that said, Bonify, our friend John Ainsworth, they've joined forces on doing a collaboration with the Metal blockchain. And this is what kind of brought them to my attention, joining their banking innovation initiative. And with that, I then got in touch with John to see if that was something worth talking about. And we just wound up getting into a broader conversation around all of their work in identity and how things have shifted around, the way that perceptions of blockchain have ebbed and flowed, kind of along the lines with cryptocurrency pricing, which it shouldn't, but it seems like it does. So I'm not sure how much that really comes into play, but let's just have a listen to the conversation. I think John had some real interesting things to say. I'm here with John Ainsworth, the CEO of CU Ledger, Bonify. Well, that's one of the things I think we can talk about is exactly how the branding works these days. John, I saw an announcement that came out of your shop just this last week, which that made me think, okay, it's time to get kind of a catch up on where things stand with Bonify. So thanks for taking the time.
No, great. Always great to participate and great to reconnect, and obviously still a passionate subject.
So what I saw was that Bonify has now joined on with the Metal blockchain banking innovation program. So if maybe you can, well, first off, maybe say a little bit about that, but also, I still see almost interchangeably. You've got MemberPass going. You've got, Bonify as a brand name. A lot of folks, I think, still know you as CU Ledger. Can you kind of compare, contrast how those all fit together?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, as you recall, our journey started off back in really 2017 as CU Ledger, which was really to find a use case for blockchain applications. And there were 70 or so credit unions that originally participated in that, even some from Canada. And so a couple of years ago, we actually evolved our DBA name to Bonify. The backstory is Bonafide. I want to verify who Glenn is. And the little dotted I's actually stand for peer-to-peer, which typically is referenced for blockchain. So our corporate name is CU Ledger. Bonify is our kind of market name to declare we're going after the fraud. And MemberPass is actually kind of our flagship product. And that's evolved over time of having a blockchain use application, which we still have, but it's evolved actually on to use other forms of enhanced cryptography. Today, biometrics obviously is a big play, but so CU Ledger is still our corporate name. And as such, we had a lot of original investors that, they just wanted to be part of the movement. And so part of our announcement, and we can talk through it, is still to kind of keep that community and make sure we honor those original investors. And whatever the new innovations come, we want to make sure they stay a part of it.
And I think from what I'm hearing, that initial research kind of led you to the point that, identity is, probably the single most pressing use case, which is what led on the Bonify path.
Absolutely. And so, I'll give some credit to John Best and the original kind of architect of this as a founder, along with, Rick Cranston and some others. And the recognition was identity is kind of the foundational blocker, the railroad, if you would. I have to have verification on both sides of the equation for whatever it's exchanged. That could be currency, that could be data, what have you. And so our effort here is some of those early use cases with identity, which coupled with things like CU Pay, the payment aspect. Identity's always been the foundation. And as you see with the fraud and abuse today, that clearly continues to be a challenge.
Yeah, that certainly isn't going away anytime soon. I would totally agree. That's the focus area. In terms of this innovation program with Metal, I noticed from the website they've got Fiserv and Jack Henry on board, so obviously they're thinking about it down those lines. I see 8 credit unions in addition to Bonify on the website. Can you say a bit about where you see that innovation program heading and what you think that kind of collaboration can yield?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there's several consortiums actually around blockchain or distributed ledger initiatives, and it's kind of fascinating to me that there's a renewed interest. Here we are in 2024, effectively 7 years later after we kind of had the first use cases. And to be honest, part of me was like, okay, suddenly everybody woke up, and why is that? And I think one of the kind of acknowledgments I'll also give is Vice Chairman Hopman of NCUA, and he continues to be on the road and evangelizing future
Yeah.
technologies. But Patelco, for example, came in and they're an early investor. They're participant in CU Ledger, and so Vibrant Credit Union, Pete Nolte is kind of a passionate participant. So we're like, hey, if now's the time, well, let's make sure that we capture in whatever the consortium or community could be. And so we're excited to participate this one as well.
I'm glad. I was wondering because I've definitely got that sense of this renewed sense of energy in the space. And I don't know. I mean, do you think it tracks to some extent? I mean, we're not talking about crypto here per se, but with the crypto winter and now we've got the higher price points again. Do you think that's just a coincidence, or you think that's part of what might be getting people a little more focused in the space?
I think it's a great question. I think some of the other initiatives, for example, like open finance, open banking,
Yeah.
DeFi, clearly that is a catalyst for this. And as you start to look through some of those kind of mediums of exchange, the question becomes, what's the most efficient source of both the verification and the movement of funds? And so I think there's a combination of, open banking, open finance. We went from faster payments now to real-time payments. And so when you start to look at those technologies, there are those that say, hey, there's an opportunity to have more efficient, exchanges, both in cost and in time. And that also on the other side puts some implications on the incumbents, right? So you've mentioned the kind of core processors. We know the networks, Visa and MasterCard, they have a lot of territory to defend. And so certainly they want to make sure they haven't lost steam because, they used to be a centralized organization and now you've got these denser, decentralized organizations. So I guess the point is there's kind of a combination of market factors that, finally for us, it's a wake up time.
Yeah, like I said, I mentioned Fiserv and Jack Henry. Don't want to shortchange Temenos in there too. I see all 3 of those. So yeah, I think that kind of gives some sense of where the connectivity that takes place in terms of getting this stuff out to market. The fact that they're involved as well. You mentioned payments also, and along with the identity piece with Bonify, I know you were working on a cross-border payments pilot as well.
Correct.
I understand there's a little bit of an update there.
Well, so, we did that back in 2019 and we partnered with R3, which was, another distributed ledger organization. At that time, they had a lot of traction in finance. And so the use case was really to prove that we could move money between 2 entities real time, and we could actually have that in an assurance that had all of the KYC, AML aspects of it. And the great news is we did. And, at the end of the day, Glenn, it's still a ledger we're playing around, whether it's decentralized or distributed ledger or it's centralized. So that use case is, part of the early kind of learnings. And that's part of what we're contributing to some of these other consortiums. So when we look at, kind of the Metal Banking Innovation Program, for example, that's one of the aspects, our learnings in terms of the use case applied to their actual ledger versus an R3 or Hedera or, Hyperledger or what have you.
I noticed, I believe there's 8 credit union logos on the website for this innovation program. Are they also kind of part and parcel of CU Ledger's original research, or are some of those coming at it from a different angle?
Some of them are new, and
Good.
as you know, there's a lot of transition in the credit union space, and we have a lot of new blood, if you would. And so some of them are kind of legacy organizations, although they actually have some new talent within them. So, Patelco would be an example of that. So it's kind of a mix across the medium.
Is it fair to say, I mean, you are kind of running 2 separate tracks at this point, because like you mentioned, you want to keep that research aspect, the original mission of CU Ledger going, but you've also, gotten a little bit further down the path of member pass and productizing some of these things as well.
Absolutely. And what that just I think kind of illustrates is the varying levels of technology. And, I've always evangelized that technology is typically not born in the US. We typically see it coming out of, APMEA or, Europe, and then it kind of comes over to Canada. And by the time it gets to Canada, I know it's probably a year or so from hitting the States. And so in the US, for example, if you look today and say, where are the fraud and risk solutions, they're kind of more traditional. They're using some of the standards of FIDO2, OAuth, and I don't want to get too geeky or techie on this, but there are standards that are more relevant today in the US. But if you look at the rest of the world, some of these other emerging technologies, the W3C is kind of the governing body, and that's really where some of these other technologies are coming underneath. So we've got, how do we use the technologies that are relevant for today to make sure we're adding value for today, but we're also mindful of those that are, kind of coming from an emerging tech standpoint. So yet again, for things like open finance or DeFi, we can continue to be part of the consortium.
Yeah, you mentioned Canada there as kind of a leading indicator, and I believe you also mentioned that the original participants in CU Ledger included some Canadian credit unions. Are you seeing some of those indicators coming to fruition north of the border?
Well, it's still emerging, right? So it's kind of hit or miss. I mean, they've tried some of the same use cases we have, and I will say they haven't really found the secret sauce either. So on the identity side, they're actually doing a lot that can transition. But if I look at some of the other use cases, smart contracts, digital currencies, they run into the same kind of issues that we run in the States in that sense. Regulatory, consideration, some of the other costs to scale. So there's some research that I would say maybe a little ahead, but it's not that they've commercialized it at scale either.
Got it. I mean, and smart contract is always one that really captures my attention, which kind of naturally has a payments component that rides right alongside it. So I'm really interested to see where that goes. So, what's the best way for people to keep track of where you're going with CU Ledger's research, with this innovation program, with Bonify and MemberPass more generally?
Well, I think, for one sense, our board for Bonify still has some of the actual kind of blockchain enthusiasts. Schools First has always said, hey, we still want to continue, the journey. Meritrust is also a board member of Bonify. So we actually have some of those, even within our own kind of governance, board system. But I would say to the broader community, for those that were actually kind of part of the original camp, we welcome to help enable them to participate in the program. Certainly, as you see, there will be some announcements for those that are coming in outside of CU Ledger. And, again, our effort is just to make sure that, we're all partnering together. And, as one of our goals as a QSO is to basically kind of help that collaboration and effort. But, we can enable for those that were kind of part of the original community, and there'll be more kind of coming through that. But we can also be ambassadors for those that are kind of new in the entrance, and, are kind of going at this from a fresh perspective or a new perspective.
Wonderful. John Ainsworth, CEO of Bonify, MemberPass, CU Ledger. Thanks. I really appreciate the catch up. This is very informative. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Always good to connect, and look forward to talking to you further.
Great. So Bonify and CU Ledger have been at the forefront of this stuff, as John mentioned, along with our buddy John Best here at Best Innovation Group. We kind of helped get them off the ground at the very beginning. And these issues are, continued to be top of mind, particularly on the identity side. Definitely worth following along, and we thank John for taking the time to talk about that stuff with us. We will not be posting a new episode next week on July 9th, taking a bit of a July 4th holiday. So please enjoy the holiday. As I said at the beginning, we will be having that following week on July 10th, on the Wednesday, July 10th at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific, the CU Town Hall. So if you get a chance to join us for that one, cutownhall.com to ask for an invitation. Free to join, just need to register. And we will be back, as we normally are, with new content here at the Big Cast on Tuesday afternoons. We got a whole bunch of great stuff lined up coming up for the rest of July into August, and of course, come September and the busy conference season with Finovate, et cetera, et cetera. So no shortage of things to be talking about over the course of the next couple stretches. If you got anything you'd like to tell us, we'd love to hear from you. big-fintech.com, you can find us. You can find me via my firm, 154 Advisors, at 154 Advisors on X, Blue Sky. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find the Best Innovation Group at Big FinTech or John Best at JB FinTech. As I said, nothing new next week, but do check in again. Or please, even better, If you haven't done so already, like or subscribe to the podcast. You can do that at Spotify. You can do that at Apple Music. You can always find us again at the Best Innovation Group website, where you find the archives of all the past materials. And definitely check out the show notes. I've mentioned several links that I'll be posting to kind of get deeper into some of the topics that we've talked about. And you can find those at any of our those locations as well. As always, thanks for listening. We'll see you soon.
Check back each week for the latest from the Big Cast. Or better yet, we hope you'll consider subscribing for free via Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you have questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. Tweet us at Big FinTech, email info@big-fintech.com, or visit us at big-fintech.com and click on the Media tab, where you can post a comment or check out our archive of hundreds of past episodes. See you next week.